Welcome to the Rock and Roll Show podcast. We're here to share the magic of experiencing live music together with strangers and with friends, and to get to know our guests a little bit better through their concert experiences. I'm your host, Alex Gadd, and I do this because I love talking about live music with people. Finding out what bands someone likes and what shows they've been to allows us to get to know and understand one another a little bit better. And hey, it's just fun swapping stories about the shows we've seen together over the years. Our guest today is Tom Williams, the founder and managing director at Edge Partner Consulting. That's a go-to market consulting firm for SaaS businesses. Tom spent the bulk of his career in sales and channel management for various technology firms, and that's how we met each other a few years back, where we hit it off over our shared love of live music. So we have a lot to talk about. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Super excited to be here, and it's great to connect again.
Yeah, I'm really glad too. All right. It's always interesting to find out how people who love going to live music got into music. So was music part of your childhood? Was it around the house? How did you get into music in the first place?
So I grew up in a small town in Northern California, and we've heard the term food deserts. That was really a music desert, right? There was the AM radio and free channels on the television, and that was your source of media and entertainment, right? And so we don't really have a ton of music in the house outside of the usual Christmas carols, and the Christmas music wasn't really a constant. My older brothers and sisters brought some of that music in, but it wasn't really until about 1978 when 13, my father passed away, and my mother did two things that I'll forever be grateful for. She first bought a console stereo, the old wooden cabinets that had the combination of an 8-track player, an AM/FM radio, and a turntable. And that was really the first. I now had the hardware, right? So that was in there. The second thing that she did, which was awesome, was she got a second stereo to go upstairs where the kids hung out, right? And that was really an opportunity to experiment and isolate and really experience music on a much more personal level than just ambient. So that was really the first introduction of music. And then the second thing that happened was my sister was dating now my brother-in-law, and he was a classically trained musician. His father was a classic violinist. They played chamber music. They had quartets. We would go to their place and they would play out in quartets, but they were classically trained musicians. But like most kids, were rebelling against their parents, so picked up the electric guitar, the bass, and the drums. And so in that house, there was two bands. There was the younger band and the older band. And just hanging out there, the process was a great introduction. And it also was interesting to hear what they were listening to. Because again, unless you picked up Rolling Stone, like you really didn't know what was happening outside your zip code. That was really the introduction.
Now, early on, you're listening to your mother's stereo. What kind of music were you listening to once you got access to a little bit more pop music? What was the first band you really got into?
We got a pretty steady flow of rock classics, although that really didn't connect with me. The music that I started to connect with was really the alt rock stuff, the U2, the Jam, Cheap Trick, a little bit of Petty for sure, Santana, but his later stuff after Enter Secrets, that kind of thing. And that was really, I always felt like an outsider, like I wanted to be off the mainstream. So if it was popular, I probably wouldn't have liked it, or at least that was my position at the time.
That's very insightful. Yeah, and those bands were all the rock and roll side of the new wave era, right? Tom Petty was even considered new wave for a while.
Cheap Trick was punk rock. I couldn't
Yeah,
believe they were, and believe it or not, the Go-Go's played with a band called X in LA. They were in the
yeah.
same studio, their same practice studio. So they started off as a punk band, which no one would have ever seen come at
Well,
night.
Belinda Carlisle, interestingly enough, was the original drummer in Pat Smear's band, The Germs.
No, really?
Yes.
Dude, I thought I knew everything about the Go-Go's. Okay.
No, she started off as a real underground punk drummer, but she was not good at that. She was good at being a singer.
Yeah, and they toured across the UK in divey bars with skinheads
Yeah.
and got booed off stages and beer thrown at them, and they just rocked on. That gave them that kind of edge, right? So it was,
Yeah,
yeah, it
they
was,
were tough. In the Go-Go's, they played bubblegummy kind of pop music, but they came from gritty background.
and
It was
discipline,
great.
right? Like just power
Yeah.
through it, right? Just, I think that commitment to the craft I've always admired that.
So the first concert you ever saw was not U2, and it was not Tom Petty, as I recall. Is that correct?
You know what? And I was gonna lie, but I'm gonna because the first band wasn't as cool as I really wanted it to be. But truth be told, when I was in the seventh grade, my sister bought tickets to Elvin Bishop, fooled around and fell in love with the
Yes.
overalls, and they played at the it's a multi-purpose venue. Roller skating on Friday, basketball on Saturday, and the Army Reserve training on Sunday. So it was a pretty cool venue.
That's great. And did you like the show?
I did. I mean, I had never been to a concert before, so I didn't really know what to expect. And there was Humboldt County. It was the visibility once you get about 30 feet from the stage is difficult. But yeah, it was a fun time. Yeah, it was a really fun time.
Do you remember anything about that show?
I think the biggest thing was just there was just a huge mix of people there. Like we were in a mill town and predominantly heterogeneous kind of population. And then you go there, but Humboldt State was just down the street, right? So you go there and there's the beat and hippie with the blue collar mill workers, and they were all at this concert enjoying the thing. It was like all these different people that couldn't agree on what to order for lunch, but they could go in and they could enjoy a concert. That was probably the most interesting thing because that hadn't been my experience in that town, is that there wasn't a lot of tolerance for being different. So that was a cool thing, and I think it set the stage for appreciating what music can do to unify people.
You don't have that ticket stub by any chance, do you?
So I do have a time capsule, but it's not. I got a couple years before I'm trying to craft that open, so it might be in there. Yeah, but yeah, I have. Yeah,
I'd love to know how much that ticket was.
Yeah, it couldn't have been $10
$5.
in 1977 dollars. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Without getting to a specific number, about how many shows have you seen in your life?
So it definitely has waned now. I'm much more particular about what I see now: right band, right venue, right time, scheduling, all that kind of thing. But I'd say I'm probably in about the 250 range. I definitely saw a ton more when I was in college. Just being in the Bay Area, I had access to more shows. You just didn't have a lot of shows in my hometown growing up, and Santana was the biggest show that came through town, which was fantastic. But I think I'd say about 250, something like that.
And did you see that Santana show?
I did.
Good.
So it's funny because I'm ninth of 10 kids, and I'm like the bottom of the age group. And so all my brothers and sisters grew up in the 60s listening to 60s music, which I always hated. I rebelled against it. And it was the first time that I went and I saw Santana, and it was like, oh, I get it. You see the two drummers, percussionists, and you see that orchestration and just the insanity that is his playing style and just the way that he riffs. And yeah, that was a pretty important concert for me.
And why is that? I mean, just because it opened you up to 60s music, or for other reasons as well?
I think it was definitely a bias for me. To me, the reason I didn't like 60s music had little to do with the music, had much more to do with the fact that my brothers and sisters were rebelling against everything. And
Yeah.
I'm like, why can't we all just get along? It never made sense to me. And I went to see that music, and it opened my eyes to maybe I should look. And then consequently, later on, I would inherit my brother's 60s music. I got introduced to that music in much more intimate scene, and it gave me a better appreciation for that. Jefferson Airplane, that era of, especially the stuff that was going through San Francisco at the time. And I mean, who I never really understood it. And then you go to see The Kids Are All Right, and you go, oh, okay, now I get it. This is a product of their life, what they came through. They're not, oh, we chose to play this way. That was the outcome of that experience. And Neil Young Rust Never Sleeps was another important kind of item that I probably wouldn't have paid attention to had I not had that introduction, that Santana on it.
Sure. It's interesting you say that. That is, for me, I love the album, and I forget about it too often. Because for me, the 70s live music was Kiss.
Right.
And Cheap Trick at Budokan. Rust Never Sleeps is a great album. Great.
Yeah.
It's one of the best live albums ever.
I think so. And if you go back to Harvest and after the Gold Rush, and you see the earlier work, you listen to the earlier work, and you see transformation or the evolution that happens on Rust Never Sleeps, it's a pretty profound shift, right? And that, to me, just opened up a whole worldview that wasn't what you were getting at school and wasn't what you were getting on the news and in the newspapers, for sure.
So let's juxtapose that with the most recent show you've gone to see, which was what?
Brian Adams. Brian Adams
And
was
when was that?
Geez, that was earlier this year, I want to say 4 or 5 months ago. He played at the Coliseum, which is not a great venue. The minor league hockey team in here in Portland plays there. It used to be where the Blazers played, but that was back in its heyday. But now it's kind of tired, and having lived in Canada and been subjected to lots of Canadian content, Brian Adams is just in the DNA. I had forgotten how big his set list is. I forgot how just this catalog is pretty impressive. But I think the thing that was most impressive for me was I didn't appreciate that he was an accomplished photographer. And the way that translated in his concert was that he had 4 cameras, one robo camera in the back, 2 spots on either side, and then a gimbal camera that was roving around. But each of those perspectives were projected on this giant screen. He had nothing else on the stage other than the musicians and their equipment on this giant projection screen. But the key was it was in black and white. And it just had this really, visually, it was just absolutely stunning. And the way I explain it to people is if you've ever seen the cover art to U2's Rattle and Hum, where Bono is down on one knee and the spot coming down, it's really his silhouette with the microphone. And it's visually, you're right there, right? And this concert was just stunning because the visual effect of that was, to me, was more impactful than all the pyrotechnics and all the spinning upside down drum kits, and really made an incredible experience. I mean, it really took you out of the seat. Plus, I had that connection. It was a Canadian thing, and just being so familiar, it's like watching your brother play.
Wow, that's very nice. That's a good way to describe that. You had mentioned U2 before, and I know that was an early concert. I'd love to hear more about the first time you saw U2 and how that really brought it together for you in a different way than Santana had.
Yeah, so my brother-in-law at the time, like as I said, he introduced me to a lot of music, and then Cheap Trick being one, U2 being another, and really before anybody had ever heard of them. He wasn't using the internet, but I'm not sure what his sources were. But he introduced me to U2. The Boy album came out prior to their first American tour, and I just ate it up because I'd never heard anything like it. It was just absolutely magical, and I had it on play back in the days when you had a Walkman. You just over and over, right? So you just know that album. And so we went to see them at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco, which is no longer there, but at the time, it was the place for up-and-coming bands to go. The Sex Pistols played there. This is where you go. And it wasn't a big venue. It was more like a sort of a club theater kind of more of a club kind of vibe. But at the time, you don't really understand. It's before they're selling out these giant stadium tours, right? This is just some weird Irish band of a bunch of guys that barely know how to play their instruments, right? And so you go there and you don't really have that historical context. It hasn't happened yet. But you go there and it was just, they were so cool and it was a great event. And then years later, I'm talking to my neighbor who's 5 houses from me, and it turns out she was at the very same concert. She ended up partying with the band afterwards. I didn't. So who had the better experience? We could debate that. But that was one of those sort of connections. That was cool. But that was their first tour in the U.S. They really
Right.
come through, and they really weren't known to anyone.
Yeah, War was their third
Yeah.
record, was really the one that pushed them over the top. And I saw them for the first time on their 4th record, the tour for The Unforgettable Fire.
Right.
And by then they were headlining Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
So they had taken that leap. But yes, a great dynamic band back in the day and now, but in a different way back then. I feel like they were a little more raw and hungry. It was exciting.
I think the experimentation, because they didn't come from a classical music background, Edge's playing style was really organic, right? And he was doing things that were just weird, not so much like Eddie Van Halen, but sort of like that, just super experimental, just getting weird noises out. It was just cool because they were just experimenting with their instruments and just figuring it out as they went along. So it was pretty cool.
Have you seen them again on other tours?
Saw them at a Day on the Green, and then I saw them in Vancouver several years ago, but I haven't seen them more recently.
What act do you think you've seen the most of all the bands you've seen?
It's probably somewhere between Springsteen and Mellencamp. I think I'd probably give the edge to Mellencamp. Actually, both those guys. They came into my life at times and in fairly dramatic fashion. Mellencamp, when I first saw him at the Oakland Coliseum, which is not a great venue, it's actually one of my least favorite places to go, but he plays Small Town. And I literally felt like he was reaching into my soul. It was like he knew exactly what my experience was and spoke to that sort of small town ethic. But he grew up in a small town, moved to a big city. The other cool thing that he did, which I think was pretty informative for me or just kind of impactful for me, is he plays through his first set and then he pauses and he said, "Thank you all for coming out. I appreciate the support. I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about the American farmer." And I'm like, what? Never seen anything like that. I didn't go to a lot of 60s show. Maybe they talked about it then, but it was just really heartfelt. I didn't even view it as political. I viewed it as more of a community service and a commitment to a cause, right? And then to see what he did afterwards with Farm Aid, and Bob Geldof, and actually I was kind of riffing off of what Bob Geldof was doing.
Yeah. That was the thing, is that opened up the floodgates to allow all different types of pop musicians to champion whatever cause that they felt strongly.
I had a lot of respect for him before, but that was like not just a good musician, not just doing music that I like, but also standing for things that I could appreciate.
Yeah, he's amazing. A very powerful performer for sure. I'm reading his drummer's biography right now. Kenny Aronoff was his original drummer for years. And he wrote an autobiography called Sex, Drums, and Rock and Roll. And I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and I highly recommend it. So check it out if you
I'm
can.
definitely going to hit you up on that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Do you have a memory of a concert that was significantly longer than other concerts that you've seen? I would guess, as a Springsteen fan, you've seen a number of 3.5 hour shows and the
I
like.
mean, it's got to be Springsteen. If you used calories burned and sort of watts, it'd have to be Springsteen, because 3.5 hours he doesn't take a break. He never walks off stage. And so I don't know anybody, I've never seen a show go that long where there wasn't like 5 costume changes or an intermission. Right? I don't know if it's technically the longest in terms of duration, but in terms of ounces of sweat, he definitely would set the bar.
What's interesting is that early in his career, he did play within intermission. So I went to see him in the 80s a bunch, and he would play an hour and a half, take an hour break or a 50-minute break,
Yeah.
then play for an hour and 40 minutes. So you'd see a 3 hour and 15-minute concert, but it would take 4.5 hours.
Really? What tour was that?
The River, Born in the USA in 78. I didn't see it, but on the Darkness tour, he did that too. But when they reformed the band, they cut out the intermission and they just played the 3.5 hour shows. So it started when he was 50. He started playing the same length of performance time, but with no break. And then it got crazy through the 2000s. I saw him in 2016 at the end of the River 35th anniversary tour. He was playing 4 hours straight. I saw him at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, and he played 4:01. And then he went to Philadelphia 2 days later and played 4 hours and 3 minutes.
Oh my
And that
God.
was
Yeah.
straight. And as you said, they even had an encore, and the rest of the band would walk off, and he'd fake walking off and then just walk right back on.
That's hilarious. I forgot that. I saw the Born in the USA tour, and I had forgotten that.
On the other end, have you ever been to a concert that was cut short? And I'm asking this because I saw the Foo Fighters 2 nights ago, and because of lightning, they canceled the show after 11 songs, and I was very disappointed.
I read about that, and yeah, you were not alone in your displeasure. Not one that was necessarily cut short, but Joe Jackson, for sure. For sure. Like for him, it was like going to the grocery store, right? You go in, you do your thing, you pay your money, you leave. I can kind of understand it because where he was in that point in his career was well after the Look Sharp sort of 80s heyday in terms of pop music. And then he was going into Jump and Jive at that point and was kind of going in different areas musically. And everybody wanted to hear Look Sharp, like they wanted to hear that album, right? And, you know, seminal album and cool stuff. And he actually at one point told, no, I'm not going to play that. And at one point he told the audience to shut up because you're going to miss some really good bass work or something like that. And I'm like, oh, that's a new one. I haven't heard that before.
I hear you. So of all the concerts you've seen, do you have a most memorable one or a few concerts you can share?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a, you know, it's a toss up. I think early on, I would definitely say Joe Walsh with Red Rocks. That was that one. The venue was insane, and I love Joe Walsh. But you know, that night, There was a torrential storm that came through, pouring down rain. You're sitting in the rain and you got to get there early because parking is brutal. But we got there early and we're standing in the rain and they're selling ponchos for whatever. And so everybody's in ponchos, and it's actually kind of a carnival because at least in those days you could buy anything. But yeah, there was lots of stuff. Anyway, and ponchos. And so this pouring down rain and a lightning storm comes through. But the lightning storm was, Red Rocks is set up so that it's up against the rocks and it looks out into the valley and you can see Denver off in the range. But you have a wide view it's just expansive. I'd never seen lightning in my life that went from one side of the horizon completely across the sky into the other side. So much so that the crowd was cheering the lightning. It was like part of the show. And Joe Walls is out there. It's raining and my guitar is waterproof, so we're gonna play. That was pretty cool. But that was pretty young at that point. I think I was a junior in high school when I went to that show. But I think that's a close second. My favorite would be the Talking Heads and Stop Making Sense at the Greek Theater in Berkeley. Just a cool venue, small venue, natural amphitheater. He walks out on stage with that cool zoot suit and the big shoulder pads, and he's got the blaster in his hand, and he sets it down, he hits play, and it's the intro to Burning Down a House. And what was cool about that is he's on an acoustic guitar, and I'm like, is the band striking? What's going on? And so he's playing, and as the music progresses, each musician would walk on, right? So there would be this sort of slow progression, which culminates in the sort of crescendo of that drum roll, which everybody knows in Burning Down the House. And it was so cool. Like, God, that guy's cool. This is the revenge of the nerds, right? This music gets to stand up and achieve rock star status. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I never saw them live, but I've seen the movie multiple times, and it does look so cool the way they come out. And the roadies are wheeling the drum riser on stage. On the other end of that, do you have a concert that was your most disappointing concert?
Unequivocally. Yeah, not even close. There's just one that stands out that is seriously the biggest waste of my time in my life, and that was Yngwie Malmsteen. And I didn't know anything about him before. My roommate in college worked for Bill Graham Productions at the time and would get tickets to random shows. And so we went to this show and we had pretty decent seats. We had third row at the Concord Pavilion in Concord, California. And we go in and, dude, it was so loud. I literally didn't hear a single note that guy played. It was like this sonic wave just accosting me. And I wear hearing aids today because of that concert. I don't know that definitively, but I'm pretty sure. It hurt.
Yeah.
I was taking chewing gum and stuffing it into my ears, and it absolutely hurt. That one was not fun. Wasn't enjoyable at all. We ended up leaving early.
I'm sorry to hear that. And it is funny that you say that you didn't hear a single note because Yngwie Malmsteen plays a lot of notes.
And he was just a weird onstage presence. He was just sort of the anti-rock star. He just was, you're here to see me play and deal with it.
Speaking of shows you didn't know anything about the act going in, did you ever see a band that you had never heard of before that you were impressed by?
Yeah. So back in the day, I was working for a company called Exact Target. And at that period of time, we were having a moment. Things were going really well and we were rocking and rolling and about to IPO and all those things. And so we got really good bands. And so our customer conference every year was all about the party. Yeah, you go there to meet people and connect and do business and all that. But it was all about the party. And the thing was, it was hilarious because their event marketing team incorporated the band reveal as a big key message of promoting the event, right? So they did this whole thing like, hey, we're going to announce the band soon. And everybody was like, who's the band? Who's the band? It was like this big thing. And so they had Train and Imagine Dragons and just fantastic bands that at one point they bought everybody tickets. They bought 3,000 tickets to Katy Perry because she was playing there. So it was,
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Anyway, the thing that they would do is they'd have the concert and then there'd be an after party with a band. And then there'd be another after party with a band. And there might be a third after party with a band, which of course would culminate at the Steak and Shake at 2 or 3 in the morning. But one of those bands played at the Opera House, but in the second stage, up above the Opera Amphitheater, in just a small venue. It looked like a small nightclub, and it was the Fray. And I hadn't seen them play before, or didn't know anything about them before, but yeah, that was one that I really enjoyed and listened to them today.
That's great. It's fun to discover bands live. Not, hey, check this out, listen to the CD or listen to the song, but just walk in and
You walk in
enjoy
and you
something.
go, oh, these are cool. This is cool. And like the whole set list, right? It wasn't like, oh, they have that one song. So, yeah.
Have you been at a show where they brought out an unannounced guest before? And if so, what's your favorite experience there?
Okay. So let me just preface this by saying the greatest guest artist, and I haven't been to this show, but I'm just going to put it out there, and I know you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. When the Foo Fighters did the Tyler Hawkins Memorial and his son comes out to play My Hero, I get choked up just saying that. There is no greater musical moment like in society. That's everything that's great about the world right there in that song.
We have one more drummer that's going to come up and play with us tonight. And let me tell you, I don't think I've ever seen anyone hit the drums as hard as this person. But beyond that, he's a member of our family, and he needs to be here tonight with all of us. And I think it makes sense that he's going to come up and play with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Mr. Shane Hawkins on the drums. Shane starts this song.
The kid playing after his father passed away, playing My Hero, and when you see him play, he plays like his life depends on it. I'm just bawling. I've never had any reaction like that to any other live event. And I wish I would have been there for that because that would just have been epic, but it definitely would overshadow any of the other guest appearances. That one stands out for me.
That's a great answer. Thank you for that. So I'd love to switch just quickly to talk about venues because we've talked about a couple of really fantastic venues you've been to before. What's your favorite concert venue?
You know, it's interesting. Red Rocks is definitely visually very cool, but it's natural amphitheater. You're sitting on concrete, right? It's not particularly comfortable. And today, it's all about comfort for me. Honestly, now here in Portland, there's a venue called the Arlene Snitzer Auditorium, and it's more like an opera house with the two mezzanines and then the main floor. And if you can get in on the floor, I saw Mellencamp in the first row of that, and it's so intimate. And bands don't have to play loud, so you can really appreciate the music. And you don't go see Kiss there, but Chris Stapleton or I'd love to see Blackberry Smoke there, by the way. The concerts that I was seeing, I saw Amos Lee there, and I love that venue because the experience is top notch.
That's great. What venue have you seen the most shows at?
Probably the Rose Garden here in Portland. That's where the Blazers play now, which isn't acoustically, it's not great. Springsteen was fine there. He did well, but I think that he had the equipment to accommodate that. Plus his crew is pretty solid, but you don't always get great acoustics in that arena.
Arenas are tough. Most of them are not built primarily as concert halls. How about on the other end of that, any concert venues you really didn't like that you would actively avoid?
I think the Oakland Coliseum, just because it's so big. When I saw U2 there, they had 2 scaffolding set up with projection screens on. They were triangular, and they had 3 screens on that. And that's what you watched the concert on, because our seats were back in the end zone because that's what we could afford. It's just so big, and it's just so many people. And I don't know that that necessarily enhances the music experience. Like at the Warfield, right? You're right there, right? It's a personal experience. At those Coliseums, it's different. And some people are into that, and it's not what I enjoy. So it's just too big. Plus, it's just such a epic effort to get that many people in one place at one time, right? There's just lots of logistics that make going there much more difficult.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this a lot these days because for both of us, you and I, the bands that we are most familiar with and like the most play bigger arenas because they're popular. And so they have choices. Do they play 5 nights at the basketball arena or 2 nights at the football stadium? They get the same amount of money for the 2 nights at the football stadium as they do for the 5 nights at the arena, and they have to work 3 less days. So selfishly for an act, I understand why they'd want to play the biggest place they can if they can sell it out. But for the fan, that benefit analysis is inverted. If you go to a football stadium, you're watching it on TV almost exclusively. You're not seeing the band because they're so far away, and it's a hassle to get in and out. And you're exposed to the weather. Like the other night, I missed half a concert that I spent full money for, and the band got paid in full, and the promoter got made all their money, but the fans get screwed. So it is an interesting thing, but I go to a lot of stadium shows and I am getting less and less interested in continuing to do that because you end up watching it on TV and I could stay at home and save a ton of money. I'm trying to figure out a way to communicate this to the industry because I'm nobody and the industry is huge and well oiled. But it is really something I wish the big artists who care about their fans would think more about.
I think that for me, Live Aid with Freddie Mercury. Oh yeah, I'd crawl across broken glass for that. Sure, absolutely. Like you would do whatever it takes to do that. But I think that the difference there is that there's more going on there than just the music and just the band, right? There's the broader
Right.
cause. There's the Freddie Mercury story. So when you take the value proposition, the cost benefit analysis of going,
Yeah.
if you can make it a bigger than one band, one act, one song, then I think you give people a reason to go through the pain and suffering of just showing up.
So overall, favorite type of venue to see a show in? We're going to acknowledge it's not coliseums or stadiums, but amongst arenas, clubs, theaters, do you have a preference?
I'm really more of the clubs and theaters, smaller acts that are more intimate. My musical choices have changed a little bit as I've grown older, and so I'm more focused on musicians and the talent and technique than the blaring. Like I'm not gonna go see Kiss. At one point, I probably would have, but that's not gonna happen. But that's where I'm at today. Famously,
Right.
at the Arlene Schwartz is just a fantastic show. Just super
Yeah.
intimate, great music, great vibe. Makes you feel good about it.
Right on. Have you ever met any musicians at a show? Have you ever been backstage at a show?
No, no. I mean, the closest was my brother-in-law's family had a band called Rolls Rock, and they toured with Loverboy and pretty special back in the day. That was the closest to greatness I ever came. Actually, that's not true. I met Belinda Carlisle at a Microsoft event. So they were playing a corporate event. It was a small venue. They had the mezzanine level, old school kind of amphitheater. And I was walking upstairs, and three of the largest people I've ever seen in my life are coming by. And they're just enormous, right? And I'm up against the wall, letting them pass. The fourth person was Belinda Carlisle. And I'm like, I'm a huge fan. I wasn't hanging out and partying with her, but it was pretty cool to meet her. And I will say that we're about the same age, and she looked fantastic.
Did she acknowledge you when you said
Oh,
that? Or
absolutely.
did she
Yeah, no,
just
she was
walk by
very
you?
gracious, very gracious. And there was a normalcy to it, right? Like it wasn't like, oh, I'm talking to a rock star. There was no leather pants and, you know, bandanas, but yeah, it was cool.
Just a couple more questions. There's a bucket list I want to get into. Which band that's still performing that you've never seen before would you like to see?
I think Chris Stapleton would be fantastic just because I have so much respect for the the quality of that work, and he has range, right? It's so cool to see so much talent. I'd love to see Chris Stapleton. That would definitely be on the bucket list.
Yeah, I saw him 2, 3 years ago at the Garden right after COVID. He was incredible. He's great. He's truly great. That word, it gets overused, but it is appropriate for him. He is such a talented man, and both as a singer and a guitar player and a songwriter.
God, you look at the songs that he's written for other people. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a multi Grammy Award winner, and yeah, and deservedly so.
I can't recommend it highly enough. Go out there and find a show for him and go see it. How about concert venue that you haven't been to yet? Most of the people on this show say Red Rocks is the place they'd like to go that they haven't been to yet. You can't say that. So what would you say?
MSG's got to be on there, only because
Oh
everybody
my
that I've
God.
heard
Get out here,
yeah.
Tom. Get over here. I'll put you up and we'll go see a show at the Garden.
Yeah, I haven't been to MSG before. It was to see a Knicks game, but that's not the same. But that would be up there, and I'd like to go to Hollywood Bowl. It's one of those places, right? I'd love to go see a show there.
Never seen a show there either. I'd love to. Yeah. Do you have any tickets for any shows upcoming for the rest of the year?
We're going to see the Foo coming up next month, so that'll be they're playing at an outdoor venue. But yeah, that'll be a cool one.
Check the weather before you go.
We should be okay in August. That'll be a cool one, and I'm hoping that Amos Lee gets through town again. I'm always good for seeing his show. Actually, I stand corrected. I met Amos Lee. We were hanging out by his bus and met his band. Yeah.
How did you end up there? That is the question.
It's a small town, and it's like there's only one place to park the bus, and there's only one bus. So we were hanging out, waiting. We were there with friends, and we were waiting for friends, and we're hanging out, and the band comes out. And so the band's coming out, and we're hanging out, and I don't know if you've seen them play, but the drummer plays with these enormous childlike drumsticks, right? And I'm like, hey, man, you play with really long drumsticks. How does that work for you? And he goes, are you a drummer? And I'm like, no, I just pay attention. And so, got into a conversation about drumsticks, and then we were just hanging out, and they were super nice. And then all of a sudden, Amos Lee comes up, and we ended up having a nice little conversation outside the bus. It's not like meeting Geddy Lee, but it was still pretty cool.
Geddy Lee, Amos Lee, they're both Lees.
Exactly. That family reunion.
Right on.
Yeah. Exactly.
There you go. But my final question really gets to the heart of the whole point of this podcast. What is it about live music that keeps you coming back and going to seek out more of it? What is it about live music that speaks to you?
To me, it's always been about those moments of transcendence, those moments where you can forget about everything in the outside world and it takes you to another place where you literally are transformed from your seat to another place. And to me, that is a fantastic feeling, but also very unifying in terms that I think we all can appreciate something like that. Generally, you don't go there alone, right? You're experiencing that same thing with the people that around you. And so for me, when I look back, and hopefully that came out in some of our conversations today, the concerts that meant the most to me are the ones where there was those moments of transcendence. And it could just be one song or one set or one night, but that's okay. I think one of the coolest examples of that is I was in Chicago, and a friend of mine, we were doing a jazz crawl, and we were just going from jazz club to jazz club, small, tiny thing. And we walked into a tiny jazz club. I mean, literally it was the bar was along one side, single row of bar stools. There was two risers, one on the left, one on the right. There was a drum kit on one and a piano on the other, and you walked in between to go to the bathroom. It's that small. And at one point, we were there for the first set, and that was cool. The second set, they say, hey, is Happy out there? Happy, anybody out there? And there's maybe 30 people in this bar, right? And all of a sudden, this guy comes up in sweats. He's got the cutoff shirt and carrying the largest rum and coke I've ever seen in my life. And he sits down at the piano. And I'm telling you, he plays for 45 minutes. And it was like I'd been transported, right? It was just absolutely incredible for that experience to push through all the smoke and all the booze and all the venue and all of that other distraction and take you to a place that was really special. Those things just don't happen enough. And so I think every time I go to a concert, I'm trying to capture those kind of moments.
Wow, that is really well said. Tom, thank you so much for your time today. It was great talking with you, and I look forward to taking you to a show at Madison Square Garden sometime in the near future.
I'm taking you up on that, bud. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do it. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, and thank you all. That's it for today's conversation. We'll be back next Tuesday, and if you like what you heard today, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe or follow to make sure you get notified about every new episode, and please tell your friends. Also, a reminder that we release a playlist for every episode, so look for the Rock and Roll Show podcast playlist on Spotify every week, featuring songs by the bands mentioned during each episode. So check that out. Additionally, we want to know what you think, so please leave us a comment and we'll try to respond to every one of them. The Rock and Roll Show podcast is a World Highway Media production. I'm your host, Alex Gadd, and until next time, Remember that life is short, so get those concert tickets.